Welcome to the Revenue Builders Podcast, a weekly show featuring B2B sales leaders and executives. Hosted by five-time CRO John McMahon and Force Management co-founder John Kaplan, the show goes behind the scenes with the people who have been there, done that, and seen the results. If you enjoy our content, please subscribe, rate, and review the show to help us reach more people. Revenue Builders is brought to you by Force Management. We help companies improve sales performance, executing the growth strategy at the point of sale. Find us at forcemanagement.com. Enjoy today's episode.
Doug, your book, Rethinking Success, is about the elusive notion of success and how the very things we do to attain success can prove counterproductive and leave us feeling empty at the end. And you say that we're left feeling empty because success, without maintaining a larger sense of purpose and meaning, leaves many of us feeling adrift and alone. Can you expand on that a little bit for the audience?
Yeah, I think the broader context for that, John, is maybe to look at the book Robert Putnam wrote. He's a Harvard professor, called Bowling Alone. And he said bowling's a metaphor in America for what's happening in the broader society. Bowling used to be the epitome of the communal sport. Bowling teams, people would come and with their friends and family and bowl. If you go to most bowling alleys now, people are by themselves. So the question is, what's happening? And I think it feeds into the success narrative. So all the things that used to be a part of the calculus of success, the extended family, the neighborhood, religious association, institutions, small societies, like when de Tocqueville came to America, his big observation about America was, it is amazing. There is a society and a little hub of people for everything. If you want to debate, if you want to read books, if you care about philosophy, there's a little enclave of people that you can connect with. All that's gone now. All that's pretty much gone. I grew up with an extended family in the Washington, D.C. area where we'd spend all day Sunday with cousins, everybody gone. I have one sister in San Francisco, raised her family there. My two oldest boys are in L.A. I have one here. What happened? Affluence is part of the culprit. Not that it's a bad thing, but it has unintended consequences. So where does it get into the success narrative? I think, John, what's happened is the only thing left standing for people to cling on to is a business identity. And so when their identity is tied to that one thing, who are you when you're no longer doing that thing, or you've achieved all the accolades? Whereas before, you might have defined success. I have 5 close friends. I have a mother and 10 relatives that I love. So you had a much broader platform. Now you're very much alone with your success or failure. So my observation is people don't have distractions, and good distractions. They only have work, and they've identified themselves so fully with the work that they don't know who they are apart from that. I had a friend who did a kind of an amazing study for, I think it was Unilever and some others in Europe. And the CEO of one of these big international companies asked him to look at what happens to their senior people when they retire. And he found that the average age when they retired or when they died was 4.5 years after they retired. So he was talking to another, I think it was Ford Europe. I don't know. I think it was, and he was talking to the CEO, and the CEO, he told the CEO this, that's impossible. Can't be. Do the same study for us. He did. And it was 3 years for them.
Wow.
So, it's almost like if your whole identity is that, it's a crisis of meaning in a way that is beyond belief. If everything is tied to that job and that identity, I think that's what we have going on, John. So success has been narrowly defined to be metrics of money and accolades and merit badges. And it's not about, as David Brooks talks about, virtue anymore. The eulogy values versus the resume values.
Yeah. I want to come back to that, but can we talk about identity a little bit? Because
yeah, sure.
It seems like we all have like identity. Like I identify as a father, as a brother, as a friend, as a husband, and also as like a C-level executive. But the hardest one to break when I, stopped working and started to sit on boards was that identity as being identified as that C-level executive.
Yeah.
So if I do have all these other identities, but I also have this C-level executive identity or whatever my work identity is, why is it so hard for us why is it so out of balance?
Well, I think
versus the other identities.
Everything has been poured into that cup. So I had one CEO who said, I went from being who's who to who's that. And I think, I remember Senator Dick Lugar, rock star, mayor of Indianapolis, turned it around, Rhodes Scholar, Senate for 3 terms, presidential candidate, head of the Foreign Relations Committee. He was defeated and he came in office with us. And I remember kind of watching him try to adjust to this, the entourage is gone, all that stuff. And you kind of like, who are you?
But then, Doug, why? So if we're so attracted to success that we completely forget the purpose and the meaning of life, meaning that we're totally out of balance.
Yeah.
Why is it that we're so attracted to that success? And we know maybe in the back of our minds that we're completely out of balance in our life.
Well, I think there's a number of things. One is men don't have a language of the heart, number one. They don't know how to even have a conversation about this. So I'll talk to some billionaire that's really not happy. He's frustrated, but he doesn't even know how to talk about what's going on with him. So number one, we don't have a language to talk about, whereas women have a much richer way. And I always tell men, if you doubt me on that, if you're walking in the morning and you see 3 women together, number one, you'd never see 3 men together because men wouldn't know how to deal with that. So, but if you see 3 women, they're talking about stuff that matters. They're really talking about stuff that matters. Men don't do it. And I, in my class, have this fictitious conversation, John. I say, okay, so my best friend, Bill, his wife died 2 months ago. I haven't seen Bill since the funeral. I tell my wife I'm going to play golf with Bill. I play golf with Bill. My wife said, so how did it go? Oh, great. We had a good time playing. I mean, really, how did it go? How's Bill doing? Oh, never came up. That would be unthinkable to a woman.
Right.
But to a man, it's probably the norm.
I've been there where you spend 4 hours on the golf course, maybe an hour before and an hour afterwards. And then a woman will ask you, well, how's Cap doing? Oh, he's doing good. Well, how's his relationship going? How are his kids? I don't know.
Yeah. So that is one part of it. The other is culture. You have this thing of not about, there is a thing of how much is enough. I asked Rockefeller that one time. He said, just a little bit more. I think that is a part of it. But the other part is the success culture is always building bigger, better. And, I'm in the room, I have friends that are on the part of the giving challenge that Warren Buffett and Gates and these guys started. And it's just like dogs sniffing each other, just kind of like, it's not like real friendships. It's about, are you important enough to be in the room? Are you this and that? So I I think it's very, very rare, particularly for a man to define himself differently. I'll tell you a guy, if I can tell you a story, John. So the former head CEO of Pepsi is a good friend of mine, part of Path North. He was a lead director of Starbucks for 15 years. So he decided in his late 40s to retire, like 47 or something. And then they persuaded him, the board, to stay a little longer. So let's call it 50. So Warren Buffett and Carl Icahn call him and say, we'd like to have dinner with you. And he said, sure. So they have dinner in New York. And I think for 99.9% of the men I know, what happened this dinner would be unheard of. So they said, Craig, we're buying this company. We think you can make a ton of money in a couple of years, and you're the right guy to lead it. And Craig looked at him and says, guys, I'm really flattered, but I have enough. And my wife and I have decided we have some other things we want to do. Now, I got to tell you, I don't hear that story a lot.
Right. And that's because they're so tied to their identity again, right? You're so tied to that.
Well, it's almost like, why wouldn't you do it? Even though you're already a billionaire, why wouldn't you? Oh, let's just roll the dice one more time. Sure.
Why don't we just do a level set for everybody, Doug? Take us down a path to give us an inventory. Let's ask the audience some questions, because people are probably wondering, is that me? Like, How do we know right now? What question would you ask us to find out that we're just a little off balance on identity or purpose, or what are some of the common questions that would be great for people?
I think one thing to remember, this is not exclusive to the billionaire club or CEOs of public companies.
Life.
It's everybody that has any responsibility. If you're running a team with 3 people, if you are a middle school principal, the very success you have isolates you because you don't have peers and friends that you can talk to. So I would say maybe in the inventory category, and the data is interesting. From 30 to 45, we start shedding relationships.
Yeah.
So by the time you're 45, if you're lucky, you have 1 or 2. And part of that is you're building a family, you're building a company. This is a time in your life you're doing that. So the question is, do you have anybody in your life that is just loves you and is connected to you with no strings attached? Is there somebody that you can just call and say, let's hang out? For a lot of men, if you say, let's have lunch. So Cap, what's the agenda here? What's the outcome? What are we talking about? And again, a fictitious conversation, I'd say. You have this guy that was head of sales at a company. He retires. So he's moping around the house. His spouse says, well, hey, Cap, why don't you call John? You two were so close for so long in the business.
Yeah.
Can you call John and say, finally, you muster the courage, because you're not used to not having an agenda. Usually you and John would be talking about a deal or something. Mm-hmm. But you call John, he says, hey, Cap, great to hear from you. What's up? I don't know. I was thinking about us getting together. Is there anything wrong? No, I just thought we ought to get together.
So the good question might be,
hey, Cap, you remember how busy we were? And you're living the dream. In 2 years, I'll be right there with you. I will never call John again because I don't know how to tell him I'm lonely and fearful and disconnected.
It's amazing. I think a great question to build off that is, how many people do you really believe you have in your life that are calling you just to say hello? Or how many people are you calling because you haven't talked to them in a while and it's just to say hello? I got one other one I want you to contemplate for me because it blew my mind this weekend. He's a very dear friend. And if he's listening, I'm not going to use his name. I love him. He's a very, very, very successful CEO. We were at a funeral and I'm sitting next to this individual, and the individual leans over to me and he says, "Hey, as far as funerals go, how is this?" And I said, I said, "I think this is one of the best funerals ever." It was really unbelievably great funeral. Like, that's probably one of the questions. Like, what would people say about you? I was at this funeral where what people were saying about this individual, they completely spilled their cup out. They lived their life for others. It was just fantastic. And then we went to dinner at night, and I actually looked at him and I said, "Hey," because I didn't catch it. Like, you asked me like you've never been to a funeral before. This guy's 62 years old, guys.
Wow.
62 years old, I swear to God. And he said, "I've never been to a funeral." I said, "I don't believe you." I said, "I don't believe you." I said, "You don't know anybody in your life who's died?" And he goes, "No." And I said, "No, it's not possible. That would be in the Guinness World Book of Records. It's 62 years on this earth." And he went through all of his, "No, I got my buddies from rugby. I got my bop, bop, bop." And I'm just like, there's a whole nother conversation there, but it was amazing to me. If it is true, I would say that's probably the only person on earth, unless they're living in a cave.
Well, he might have just
die.
It's easy to avoid things that are uncomfortable.
That's
My
right.
question to him would be,
I didn't ask him if he didn't go to the funeral. I said, "How many friends have you had that have died?" I have I have 15 guys off the team that I played with from 1985. 15 of my teammates that are dead. Yeah. And I'm only 61 years old. So I know it's not possible.
No,
right?
no, I'm with you. And interesting to pick up again on what you were saying, John. It's interesting. Gail Sheehy, the author, did all this research on men. And she interviewed men every decade, 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, 50, 59, and 90, went all the way up. What was really interesting, the average age when a man commits suicide in America is 63.
Yeah, I read that. In your book, I think I read that. Yeah. Wow.
But you think about why. Well, by 63, you've either gotten where you thought you'd get, or you didn't, or you might have retired, but all the things you were pursuing seem to fall away. And for the first time, you're naked and you're there. What the heck? So it's troubling. So I think the thing I'd say to particularly, I'm speaking to men here, is, work to really reconnect with old friends, or find some others that you can begin to be in this conversation. Not everybody's ready for it, but some are. I try to make it easy. I think there's a small group is really a cool thing to do. If you can do it. We've done in Path North to make it easy. We do something we call MAP groups, meaning, authenticity, perspective. Once a month, you're on a Zoom call for an hour. We read an article together, something like David Brooks, contrasting resume virtues and eulogy virtues. Just read it together, and then you say, what is your perspective on it? Getting everyone comfortable just having the conversation. That is step one. And so it's, that world of the heart, it's not developed. It's not a muscle we develop,
Yeah. In your book, you talk about, to have a meaningful life, you need 4 conditions to be met. You say, first, your life has to make sense. 2, your life is driven by purpose. 3rd, that you're part of something bigger than yourself. And then 4th, you maintain rich human connections.
Yeah. It's almost a little bit of a checklist. And you kind of look at your life, and I think for most of us, we say, wow, what grade would I give myself on some of that rich human connections? I don't know, a D, a C, I don't know. So you start there and you say, am I a part of anything that's bigger than me? Well, I make some sandwiches on Christmas Day for the homeless.
Yeah.
But is that enough? I mean, is there anybody that you're really investing in, that the next generation, that will change your life if you do that? It'll change their life, but it'll particularly change your life.
And that's where you can, what you brought up a couple times now is juxtaposing what you called your resume virtues, or our concrete accomplishments with our eulogy virtues, which is the character strengths that would lift up people, at your funeral, right?
Yeah, so it's what Cap was saying. When you're at that funeral, they're not saying, well, he went to Oxford, he did. No one cares about any of that.
No.
What they care about, he showed up for me. He made that call when I was in my deepest sorrow. He did this. Or, I saw him or her kind of reach out to this person, and it blew my mind, their example. I mean, these are the things that are really the legacy that we almost invest in unconsciously. The other thing we're consciously investing in, the visible, the accolades, all these merit badges, but it's funny. I've talked to people with gazillions of dollars that they have a different set of worries. They think they could lose it all. So it isn't like, oh, I'm finally secure. No, I'm worth $6 billion. I don't. One guy tell me that in New York. He grew up really poor. I said, how often do you think about losing your money? He said, every day.
Yeah.
So
it's the same. It's the same aspects what I found. And I'm big on this concept now. I'm 61 and I've got a better understanding of myself than I've ever had by going through some difficult stuff. And I know that I'm made up of parts. So there's a part of me that is afraid to fail. There's a part of me that likes to excel. There's a part of me that wants to just relax and be with my family. And it's like people that understand their parts, I think they're just more grounded, and then integrating all those parts. Johnny, I know where you're going with this eulogy. I want to get back to that. I don't want to be morbid, but I just actually think that funerals are awesome, actually. Because for me, it's always a great time to do inventory. I sat in the pew and I looked around, a lot of people there. So I felt really good for this family. And I say, who'd show up, and what would they say? And would they say what they're saying about this individual? What would my wife say? What would my children say? It's a really, really good, exercise. But I'm reminded of what my dad said to me a long time ago about funerals. My dad was adamant about going to funerals. And I'd be like, Dad, it's depressing. What are we doing? We hardly even knew that person. My dad was like, I called it posting. You post up, you show up. And then, so my father was Jewish and I was raised Christian, but they have this concept, Doug, as you well know, of sitting Shiva. Shiva. Yeah. And so I didn't really get what that meant until my dad died, and all these people, came over and were sitting, and they weren't saying anything to me. They weren't saying anything to my mom or to me. But the whole point, I thought it was so beautiful because it was just like, and then I realized that's how the human condition is built. Like, you just want people to sit with you, man. Like, you don't want them to fix anything. You don't want them to do anything. You just want them to be there. I think it's brilliant. Shiva, sit Shiva. It's beautiful.
And it's a part of the power of presence. And I think in our manic society, we don't have time for presence.
Right.
And that's part of the success narrative that has just accelerated with more and more technology. And you kind of say, when can you be still? This is why I take a group of leaders every year for a silent retreat at a Trappist monastery. I mean, can you imagine? We have these.
I've done it. It's awesome.
It's awesome. So we're sitting together. We eat together for 2.5 days, and I give them a little notebook with one quote in the notebook, and that's it. It's by Blaise Pascal in 1666, his little book, Pensées. And it says, the fundamental problem of a person is never learning to be still within four walls. I said, we're going to test that and see what shows up. When have you ever done that? I remember the chairman of New York Life last year looking out. I'd watch him every day for 4 hours. Then he'd walk around, come back 4 more hours, just looking out at the field. And I said, when in his life has he ever done that?
Yeah.
Never.
I actually did that a couple years ago in Missouri at this place called the White House Retreat. So you got to tell me when yours is, because I want to come. It was actually, Johnny Mac, can you imagine 3 days of Kaplan not saying a word? And it was actually one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. Like, nobody was talking, but the voices in my head were so loud, they were screaming. And luckily it was good stuff that was, my parts were talking to me and trying to get my attention. And they were like, thank God that we got some quiet here. And so if you haven't done that, I think that's just an unbelievable way to take inventory. You'll figure out how you're living.
So Doug, let's talk a little bit about, you started an organization named Path North. You mentioned it a couple of times, but it was just for the audience. It was an initiative to help isolated leaders broaden their definition of success to include meaning and human connection. Yeah. And if I remember right, in your initial meeting with the leaders, and these are people that are, really high level, business leaders, you posed 2 questions to them. One was, what are the illusions you had about life? And the other one was, what are the mysteries you're still trying to figure out?
Yeah, good memory, John.
Why did you ask them those questions?
I raised those questions actually on our first international trip we took with Path North. And we took people on the Orient Express, which a lot of wealthy people can do, but we did it differently. We took magicians with us, and we called it the Magical Mystery Tour. So the magicians were great. We'd have all these black tie dinners and do all this. But every night we explored those 2 questions. What are the illusions you had? You'd have some leaders saying, my child never launched. I didn't think my wife would leave me. I didn't think so you have these things that happen to people. Stuff shows up. They've never shared any of that. And then we would share, what are the mysteries you're still trying to puzzle over, that you're just trying to figure out, And those people connected. Because when you get into that zone, you're connected in a different way. No one cares about your net worth. No one cares about your accomplishment. It's a very different conversation. Very different. Yeah.
And then going back to long-lasting and meaningful human connections.
Yeah.
Talk in the book about is to find those with whom we can be genuine and vulnerable.
Yeah.
And can you talk a little bit about why, as humans, we're more drawn actually towards authenticity or someone being genuine than we are to, somebody's status?
Yeah. I mean, because I think as humans, we know how flawed and broken and incomplete and all these things we are. And yet, all of us project this narrative, and you see it with young people. It's tragic where they're projecting a life that no one's living, but I feel like I'm left out.
Yeah.
And it's causing hell. And, last year alone, 12 and under girls, 1 out of 3 thought about taking their life. That's unbelievable. A third of the young girls under 12, because social media is making them feel you're not beautiful enough, you're not this enough, you're not that enough. So this is on steroids now, this thing. The antidote, John, is what you're getting at. It's learning to be real. So I showed a film, a short video. It's really cool. We had a big meeting in Philadelphia recently, and the first night I said, I want you to see this, because I said, a lot of you don't feel like you belong in this room because of whatever's in your head. It's bull crap.
Imposter syndrome too, right?
Yeah, it's all that bull crap.
Yeah.
And I said, so I showed this video, it's 2 minutes. It showed a film of a restaurant in Tokyo called the Restaurant of Mistaken Orders. So all the people that work there have dementia or some kind of mental failing. So over 60% of the orders come out wrong. But no one cares, because they come there to connect with these wonderful people, and the people with memory issues are laughing, the customers are laughing. And so the narrator says at the end, while 60% got their orders wrong, 100% left with a smile on their face.
Yeah.
And I said, look, why are we drawn to this? We're drawn to this because we all know we are flawed. We all know we're not as advertised. And so if we dare to really become authentic, people are drawn to that. It's like here in Washington, I say, people don't want you to be perfect. They want you to be authentic. This narrative about, if I possibly did do so, it's all this dancing around. Just tell the truth.
Right.
I am screwed up. I made a huge mistake. Next question.
That means that like our point of identity with others is not a polished image. It's really
it's a whole different thing.
It's our broken parts and our dark sides.
And it really connects us. I had this friend, I was a young guy just out of college, and I met this senator from Iowa who had a booming voice, Senator Harold Hughes. And this is how he campaigned. He ran for governor. When he ran for governor, he was a high school dropout, alcoholic. I mean, big, burly guy. He says, my opponent has said that I have been in bar fights in 6 states. That's a damn lie. It was 8 states. This guy was the most liberal member of Senate, coming overwhelmingly elected in Iowa, not because of his politics, but because this guy, if you want somebody real, you got him. He's not going to BS you.
Yeah.
So I think
Doug,
we're drawn to that. And I think all of us, people that are listening, if you can learn to let people see who you really are, warts and all, you're going to be shocked. You become safe. You become safe.
And the flip side is true too. Like what you say in your book, you have a quote. It's basically the flip of that. It says, never compare your insides to another person's outsides.
Exactly.
Never compare your insides to someone's outside. It's the flip side of it.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think everybody understands what we're talking about, but personalize it yourself. Ask yourself, I love that. We'll put it in the show notes, that one commencement speech of that guy that talks about how you living. And it's one of my favorite video clips where he just asks himself all the time, how you living? And if you just say to yourself, hey, what are 2 things I really like about how my life is going right now? or how my day went today. And what are two things that are just causing me pause, that are just really bothering me?
Yeah.
I mean, it's as simple as that. But, it's like you just said, it's the honesty and the vulnerability. And you don't even have to share it with anybody yet. Just get in touch with it yourself to say, because then you ask yourself, okay, what are you doing about it? Like, because if tomorrow the answer's the same thing, these are the two things I don't like about myself or my situation, and the next day they're the same thing. People in our podcast that are listening, we're kind of doers, where we focus on execution. It's okay to put yourself in execution mode. When you execute on that, that's a pretty good thing to execute on.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I was struck by, I think about this all the time, and it really helped me because I remember this before they had formal press conferences. Anybody could wander into the White House and talk. So Lincoln one day had one of those informal press conferences. Now, remember, up to him, all the presidents had been Eastern educated, Yale, Harvard. They're just classically, they could read Latin. They were well read. They were amazing. 6 languages, crazy. Lincoln was never formally schooled. He learned on his own, and had a whole history of failures in his life. So, and he was not attractive. He was gangly and awkward. So he gets up there, and he was vilified in the press all the time. You're ugly. You're stupid. You can't speak. And you remember the Lincoln-Douglas debates. Douglas went on the oratory of the day. You would speak for 2 hours. The Gettysburg Address, what was it, 1 minute and 40 seconds?
Yeah.
We don't remember what Douglas said. We remember what Lincoln said. But anyway, here's what Lincoln said. They said, Mr. President, you were told you look like a gorilla, you're ugly, you're stupid, you don't know what you're doing, you're incompetent, you weren't formally educated. How do you withstand the withering criticism? And he paused and said, I'm so much worse than they could ever know. And I think about that all the time, guys. I think about when I get all haughty, like, oh, yeah, you think whatever. I think I'm so much worse than they could ever know.
Everybody is.
So I mean, it's the humility to be able to say, that's me. I'm like that, and that's the cardinal virtue. And the Greeks said that. The scriptures say that. Humility. They asked one 4th century mystic, "What's the cornerstone of a thriving life?" He said, "Well, there's 4 things: humility, 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 and humility." Kind of nothing else.
So then, Doug, you've met all these, very, very successful people. You started the path north to talk to a lot of these people. Have you, to put it into perspective, have you ever met anyone that had achieved enormous amounts of success and had equal parts of purpose and meaning in their life? You have.
I have.
Interesting.
A number of them. One, I was just talking about Craig Weatherup, who's CEO of Pepsi and lead director of Starbucks. He's amazing. He and his wife, they're astonishing. I had a conversation recently with another guy who will remain unnamed. He's the number 2 in one of the biggest financial organizations in the world, and the CEO wants him to be his heir. And I met with him in New York last month, and he was the first in his family to go to college. He was number 1 in his class at Harvard Business School. And I said, wow, so are you going to do it? But thinking that, of course, he'll do it because, that's the next thing. He said, I'm not going to do it. I have plenty of money. There's other things I want to do in my life. I'm not defined by that. And I kind of like, wow, that's impressive. I said, brother, I don't meet a lot of people that have whatever it takes to make that decision.
I was just thinking about the conversation we just had on humility. And it's actually